the man said words something like this: I suppose there was a herd here, and I guess they was 10 boys tending to it. Probably, I don't really know how many they were, but I tell you what, they're not here at Shechem. They've moved over to the north, some 20 to 22 miles north of Shechem, and they are now in Dothan. Now then, he does not rely upon his daddy to tell him what to do. He knows he's to come and see about the herd. He's come to see about the brothers, and then he's to carry word back to Daddy Jacob of how they're doing. Now then, he's got to rely upon his own mind. What do I do now? Do I go back and tell Daddy they're not where you thought they were? They was there, but they're not here now. Do I go back without any news of the boys? What do I do? And at the age of 17, he relied upon his own mind. I've come to find out for Daddy how the boys are doing. If the cattle are grazing, I've left home and I better not go back. I feel like I ought to go on over to Dothan, 22 miles, something like that north, and find out about the boys, and then come back and tell Daddy how they're doing. This dream that Joseph had dreamed about his brothers coming and bowing down and doing obeisance unto him, they were envious with jealousy. And they had gone over to Dothan now, where there was evidently more grass. And there they was grazing their cattle. And Joseph embarks on a trip some 20 to 22 miles to the north, carrying out what he feels like is what his daddy would have him to do. So he, with his mind, said, I'll go on to Dothan. I'll find out for Daddy how they're doing, whether there's good grazing ground or not, and then I'll come back and go home and tell Daddy how they're doing. God sets every member in the body as it pleases him. Amen. You would think this is just a story of a little boy going and finding out about a herd of sheep or cattle, how his brothers are doing, and bring that on back. But I see the controller setting up in heaven. And God, according to Psalms 105, I think it's verse 16, was going to call for a famine. When Jacob leaves Shechem, there's not much of a main road. A main road of that day would be something, I guess, real primitive to our roads today. But over in Dothan, when he got over there, he saw the herd evidently and saw the brothers. The brothers saw him coming. There must not have been many people traveling the roads, except when you get over to Dothan. His brothers recognized him and said, yonder comes the dreamer. There comes the dreamer. I'll tell you what let's do. Let's do what we planned on doing. When he gets here, let's take him and kill him. And let's get rid of him. Jealousy is more cruel than the grave. Solomon said it in the Songs of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 6. And when Joseph got close without a, hey, brother, good to see you. How's Daddy doing? None of that. They just took Joseph, and if it had not been for the oldest boy, Benjamin, without a doubt, they would have killed him right then and there. Jealousy is crueler than the grave. They are jealous of that little boy. Daddy loved him, and Daddy made him a little coat of many colors. You could preach this of a 2-coat series. One coat, and then the coat that Potiphar gave him, that he left with Potiphar's wife. You could very well just preach about the 2 coats. No doubt the one that Daddy made him was a very beautiful thing. Or maybe Daddy had it made for him, a coat of many colors. And when they saw him afar off, they knew that was Joseph because he had that coat on. No doubt he wore it in pride. But when he got into the camp, he was greeted with a rude awakening. Them boys had prearranged, made it up in their mind, let's get rid of the dreamer now. And when he comes into the camp, Simeon said, don't do that now. Let's just put him in this pit. There was a pit pretty close, evidently, to where the herd was. And they throw Joseph down into a pit. I imagine that was the longest night Joseph ever spent in his life. That had to be one of the longest nights that poor little old 17-year-old well-sheltered boy ever spent in his life. Did it bother his brothers? If you want to read that story, I wish you would. The Bible said that after they had thrown him in that pit, they sat down to eat supper. This is what jealousy can do for you. Their own brother, their little 17-year-old boy, thrown in a pit that he couldn't get out of, and now here they are sitting down, probably eating supper. Pretty hard-hearted, I would think. Joseph, no way of getting out. There wasn't any water in this pit. When Reuben comes back, he wonders about the boy. Then evidently, while they are eating, a band of Ishmaelites, this was Abraham's son by the Egyptian Hagar. Things do come back to interrupt our family. Abraham knew better. Sarah knew better. But anyway, they violated the trust of God, and Abraham took Hagar. Their patience did not hold. They was impatient. So Sarah said, just take Hagar and have a child by him. Brother, if God says no, it means no, exactly what it says. But now then, here Abraham's oldest boy comes back, and they buy Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. They didn't think as much of him, I'm sure, as Jacob did. But they drew, the Midianites drew Joseph out of the pit, and he was sold to the Ishmaelites. Evidently they were traveling together. Best information I can find is they would have 4 camels, and they'd have them sort of yoked together, and then 4 more. And they could carry an abundance of supplies. But far as I know, really all they bought here at this stop was a little boy that had been put in a pit. While the brothers sat down and eat, and then they saw this caravan coming. They said, what profit is this if we kill Joseph? Let's take that coat of many colors and let's kill a kid and let's saturate that coat with blood. When those Ishmaelites and the Midianites had brought Joseph up out of the pit, and they carried him on in the direction of Egypt, they blood-soaked that coat, sent it back to Daddy, or may have carried it back, and said, do you recognize the coat? He said, yes, I do. That's my boy Joseph's coat. And by the evidence and what you're saying, this was the first coat, the first deception, the first lie. It was Joseph's coat given to him by his parents. I know the coat. And so the story was told. And Jacob felt like it all added up and that he'd never see Joseph no more. But God had called for a famine down in Egypt. God was just moving people around in place. Oh, I would to God today that God, who is in control, the people would be so him that wherever God wanted them to be, they'd move at his command and his call.